Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this webinar today, where we are going to be directing our attention to COVID-19 issues relative to small businesses and medium-sized enterprises. I'm joined today with our two guest presenters, Amanda Gascoigne from Amanda Gascoigne Consulting. How are you, Amanda?
I'm well, thanks, Peter. How are you?
Very good, thanks. And Matthew Karakalakis from AMK Law in Adelaide and Melbourne. Good afternoon, Matthew. How are you?
Good, thank you, Peter. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you very much. Okay, so what we would like to do is, I've already introduced you to the guest presenters. My apologies, I was a bit slow there. I'm Peter Towers, Managing Director of ESS Small Business. The first presenter today is Amanda Gascoigne, how to enhance and strengthen your relationship with your accountant. I'm going to switch across to you now. Thanks, Amanda, and you can give us that presentation. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to share my screen now and play from the current slide. Here we go. Okay, well, thanks everyone for joining live, or if you're watching on replay. Today I wanted just to talk to you about how you can enhance and strengthen your relationship with your accountant. Now, I am a chartered accountant. I'm actually a fellow of the Institute of Chartered Accountants, and I've been working with SMEs and in the accounting industry for nearly 30 years. 18 of those years I had my own accounting practice working with SME businesses, and I'm really passionate about, empowering SMEs to understand their numbers, their obligations and their potential, and, helping them achieve their potential. I'm also in the work that I'm now doing as a coach and mentor for small and solo accounting practices practice owners all over Australia, encouraging them and to have better relationships with their clients and vice versa. So I really want, you to all to be working really well together, and I give accounting practice owners the tools and different things where they can actually work better with you, their clients. So I'm going to share, quite a few tips today, and I'd like you to be thinking about how they actually relate to the relationship you've currently got with your accountant. Now, what we're going through, and we've only got sort of 20 minutes to get through this. There's a lot of content, but I've just sort of narrowed it down with a focus on, the new financial year. But look, not all accountants are the same, and I want you just to have a bit of I'm going to give you some information in relation to that, the things that you can be looking out for. I want to share with you what I believe the role of a good accountant is, the value that a good accountant can bring to the table as they work with you. I'm going to speak briefly about the fact that software, as much as I love it and I love technology, it's certainly not a substitute for your accountant. I'm going to talk also about how your accountant can actually help you all year round. And in fact, I believe that a successful relationship is one that you're not just talking to your accountant once a year. And, some food for thought as to what type of accountant you would like to be by your side in business in 2020-21. So I think there's a lot of talk, there's so much stuff on social media these days. Everyone's looking at, how much is your accountant charging? How much is too much? I feel like I'm getting ripped off by my accountant, and all of those things. And some of the conversations when I, read them and sort of get into a lot of these really disappoints me in a sense, because they're not, people aren't comparing apples with apples. So just three broad areas that I believe that when people say they're accountants, you could be thinking of, like, there's a lot of accountants, and this would come to perhaps a shock to you. There is a lot of accountants that are unregistered, and we've seen that now with JobKeeper. How many accountants are potentially using their client's MyGov account to register, and that's a sign that they aren't registered. So you would think that everyone calling themselves an accountant, a tax agent, actually have gone through the proper channels, but they're not. So I'd encourage you just to confirm that your that anyone's charging you for tax services and accounting service is in fact registered. And the way that you can check that is to see who's registered with the Tax Practitioner Board. And to be a member, to get registered with the Tax Practitioner Board, you know, there's ethical standards we need to maintain, and there's also work you've got to do to maintain that registration. So for tax agents, it's 90 hours of professional learning that a tax agent needs to do over a 3-year period to maintain that status, and that gets checked. So make sure that the agent that you're using is actually registered. And this also goes for BAS agents, but I'm talking today in relation to accountants. And then the other, the next step up from someone who has a tax agent license is then someone who's actually running their practice as a public practice. And I'm a chartered accountant, so I actually ran a chartered accounting practice for 18 years. But there's other designations such as CPAs, IPA, and you might want to have a little look to see whether your accountant falls into one of those categories. And for those, obviously, we need to ensure that we're doing all that we need to do as a tax agent, but there's more regulations there that we have to pay to become a public practice, do the training, and we get reviewed once every 3 years. We also have to do 120 hours over a 3-year period. So a lot of that work is to ensure that the knowledge of the person who's advising you is constantly keeping up to date. So they're the 3 types of accounting, you know, into groups, and I get you to have a bit of a think of that. So when you're looking at comparing prices, seeing where your accountant and the person that may be talking about their accountant is actually sitting. So what I believe the role of a good accountant is, I feel that you should be, it should be a long-term relationship that you're looking for. Now, when I went into accounting all those years ago, accountant was sort of like a family doctor, a family lawyer, that we often looked after generations of businesses, generations in families. And you know, we've seen a little bit of a change in that. Some not necessarily change, but there has been a change over the last few years in relation to people may perhaps not, you know, valuing that relationship as much as they should be. So for me, one of the things that, you know, I did and I advocate is actually having a vision that you do have a long-term relationship with your accountant. So whether that's from the accounting side or from the client side, you know, who would you like to have by your side for the longer term? A good accountant should understand what you want from your business and your life, because that's different for every SME client. So it's really about the accountant knowing what you want to achieve from your business. It's about providing exceptional levels of, you know, tax and business advice and involving you in them, not just saying that this is what we're doing, actually having the conversations to ensure that you're understanding what's going through the books, what an accountant's changed, seeing whether there's some things that could be done better. And so it's really about involving you in that whole process and empowering you with the knowledge of what the accountant's actually doing. Providing proactive advice. One of the common things that I actually hear from SMEs is they don't feel like their accountant's giving them proactive advice, that they're always perhaps leaving things to the last minute, or you're hearing of a new piece of legislation or a new piece of software from someone else and not from your accountant. So a good accountant, I believe, is proactive in, you know, bringing those things to you. They're progressive, so not just, you know, I know a lot of things that we do as accountants are very traditional. There's tax acts that hasn't changed, like lots of the parts of the tax act doesn't change, but we still need to be progressive in what we're doing and how we're working with our clients. They keep in touch during the year. It's not just this once a year interaction. That they abide by those ethical standards that I spoke about with the tax agent board and their professional bodies, and that they're ethical, honest, they're thorough. I know I've seen some evidence where, you know, there's accountants that go through, you know, through the accountant's file, the client's file really well, and there's others that just take it for granted. So there's thoroughness that needs to be considered, and obviously competency and professionalism. I also think a good accountant really does care and cares about their clients, and I'm sure many of you have actually witnessed that firsthand in the last 8 weeks with COVID and the JobKeeper and all that. I know the accountants that I work with, I've been talking to, they have shown the utmost of care and they're going the extra mile. So that's what you should be accustomed to. And they're there for you in good times and in bad. So I think that's a really important role of a good accountant. The value, looking at what do you want to get from your accountant relationship, and what value do they bring. So they help their clients achieve not their business goals, but their life goals. So really working out what you want to achieve and helping you do that either in the quickest possible time, or making sure that you're always staying on track to that goal that you want. They help their clients, start their businesses, buy businesses and sell businesses. So they're actually there for that whole journey. And that's why that long-term relationship, I believe, is so important, because you can actually have your accountant that from start to finish. And I've been very fortunate to have actually been, experienced that with many of my clients. I think a lot of people just think accountants and all that, they think that's just all they do is tax. They do so much more. And maybe at the moment, your accountant only talks mainly about tax. And what I find is with accountants, they don't often like to sell their services as such, but there's so much more that they can offer. And if part of listening to this webinar today helps you understand some of those services, and then you go to your accountant and say, well, do you offer this? This is something that I'm interested in. Hopefully, that actually opens up that line of communication. So your accountant has ample, especially those offering a public practice, that in public practice offer the skills, they've got the skills and expertise to offer you strategic planning, tax planning services, which most accountants are sort of doing this time of the year. They can help you with budgeting, cash flow, KPI monitoring, and they can help you grow and scale your business if that's what you wish. As far as helping a client at the end of their business journey with exiting, they can help you determine the optimal time frames, so when that should be the best time for you to exit, helping you to maximise your sale price and to minimise tax. They keep their clients compliant. And, that's really important, that you are up to date with all of your tax lodgements. We've seen even with JobKeeper, unfortunately, people who have been a bit tardy in their lodgement history have actually missed out on some of the government assistance in the economic stimulus packages, which has been quite sad and perhaps a wake-up call to some. An accountant will give their clients, clarity, direction, peace of mind, knowing that you've got someone who cares, someone who's professional, and someone's going to have all of your needs at front of mind. And I believe that, a good accountant is a really integral part of your team. So a lot of big businesses, they have accounting departments, or they have people looking after this stuff for them all the time. Whereas, an SME has this as an external advisor, but they're just like an extension of your team. And sort of, if you start to think of them like that, you might actually be more, responsive to actually use them in that capacity, the capacity that they're there to help you with. I hear a lot of people talk about software and say, well, look, what really does my accountant do? I give them the software. They just got to jump in and they press a few buttons, and then I get this set of financial statements and, this big bill. Let me assure you that is not what happens. Sometimes that does, depending on the level of accounting services, and sort of, I talked about those 3 different types of accountants. So yes, I've seen that happen, but the people that are potentially charging you more money, they're doing more checks and balances. Effectively, the software is just summarising your income and expenses. It's replaced a manual part of the work that we used to do. Either accountants did it or business owners did it. So the software is just actually making that a lot easier, and it's coming in real time instead of just doing it once a year. One of my favourite sayings is garbage in, garbage out, and you can put everything in that software and press your profit and loss button or press your BAS report. It doesn't mean it's going to be accurate, and that's what accountants clean up. And so just, be assured that they actually do more manipulation, reallocation than what you probably think. Software, a few things it doesn't do. It doesn't interpret tax law. It doesn't advise on fair work obligations. It doesn't help you with structuring and working out how to protect your assets, how to minimise your tax. It hasn't got the ability to ring up the ATO and put a request in for a payment arrangement or something like that. It doesn't help you apply for grants and finance applications. And these are often the things that your accountant is doing, but they're not telling you they're doing. They're doing that to ensure that they give you that service that, does give you that peace of mind and does keep you compliant. Software isn't your trusted advisor. Software doesn't provide that listening ear and the voice of reason to help you navigate challenging situations. And look, really coming back to, I know the amount of work accountants have done in the last, 8 weeks with JobKeeper. And, luckily for those that have had software, that's made that job a little bit easier for your accountants to help calculate and get the information to the ATO. But, it hasn't replaced those panicking phone calls. What are we going to do? Do we need to put our business into hibernation? What can we get? That's what an accountant does, and software can help assist in making decisions, but it's certainly not a substitute for your accountant. So if people think that they're not actually really valuing the role of the accountant, or they haven't got an accountant that's actually helping them in the capacity that they should be. So this is, I talked about that an accountant should be there all year round. And basically this is a bit of a life cycle or annual cycle that I believe you should be talking to your accountant, your accountants about. So whether or not when you start a business, and every year on year, and I think a lot of, at the moment with COVID, a lot of people have changed their perspective. They've changed their outlook on life and what they want out of their business. So it's really about this annual planning, which you might be doing now, and you'll do the same time next year. Talk to your accountant about what your vision is, how they can help you, how they can set your budgets and help you achieve what you want to. From a daily basis, how can your accountant help you with your record keeping, your bookkeeping, the optimal software and apps to help you to make decisions in your business? They can help you, look and understand your profitability on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis. If you're not doing this sort of stuff, this is what you can be doing for yourself to ensure that you are actually, making money and you're actually achieving your business goals. All the way through from, quarterly when an accountant helps you with your BAS, then, like I said, tax planning time to help you minimise your tax, FBT, and I know a lot of people say we don't have FBT. You may not do an FBT return, but if you're providing a benefit to even yourself as an employee, there is FBT implications. And then we do an end of financial year countdown, and it's tax time again. But you can see from there's a lot of areas you can be talking to your accountant about. And if you're not hearing from them, this is what they can do for you. So what type of accountant do you want to have by your side in 2021? So I'd like you to think about, taking more ownership of your business numbers and get curious. Think about your accountant in a different mindset, like I've just, in different light, like I've explained today. Be clear on the type of accountant you want to be working with, in those 3 categories. And, be really clear on how you want them to help you in your pursuit for your business and your life goals. Maybe it's time to review your relationship with your accountant. So if you're really happy and you feel comfortable with the accountant that you've got, maybe just have a bit of a chat, communicate and reset and say, look, I've heard you can actually help me with these other things as well. How can we make that happen? Or if you feel that you're not being looked after and there isn't any hope for that longer term relationship, maybe it's time to move on. But be prepared to pay for quality advice. And, crunch your numbers. If you feel like you're paying too much, have a look and see what that's actually costing you over a week. And, that might actually indicate that you actually feel like you are actually getting value out of your accountant. I want you to consider, what you pay in accounting fees as an investment and not just an expense, because we can see when, an accountant isn't used, it can be awfully expensive to fix a problem. And, I want you to have respect. I think with a good accountant and client relationship, it's about mutual respect, but have respect for your accountant, the ATO and other agencies. Provide the information on time and when they request it. Be proactive and don't leave things to the last minute. Be willing to embrace. There's a big big piece around technology and, you know, being willing to embrace new ways. Accountants are going to be working very differently now with COVID, and, you know, please respect that and try to jump on board with that. And, you know, letting, you know, that accountants do also deserve a life outside of their, whoops, I don't know what's happened there. Accountants also deserve a life outside of their practice. Whoops, something's just happened there. Sorry, I just went off. I don't know what happened there. And yeah, and that was, so, you know, I think COVID-19 and the 2021 financial year is really your opportunity to reset your relationship with an accountant going forward, to help you, you know, determine, you know, I want you to think about what business, lifestyle and income you want, communicate that with your accountant and get the support from them going forward. And happy end of financial year countdown.
Yes, it's not far to go, is it?
Not at all. So that's my little ways that I believe that you can actually, yeah, really enhance and strengthen your relationship with your accountant.
Okay, so thank you very much, Amanda. It was an interesting presentation. Obviously, accountants have really come to the fore over the last week, for 8 weeks, in helping businesses better understand the sort of information the government departments have been looking for, particularly the tax office, making various grant applications. There's been grants offered all around Australia by the state and territory governments as well as the Australian government. And a lot of that extra work is not typically taxation work. So I think accountants have had the opportunity to demonstrate to the SME market in particular that they can do a lot more work. And so for our viewers and people who are watching this as a recording later on, if you want to discuss the sort of services that accountants can provide, please contact Amanda or send me an email, and we'll give you those contact details a little bit later on. So thank you, Amanda. We haven't got any questions at this stage.
That's okay.
I now want to move on and introduce you to, just get the system to work, to Matthew Karakalakis, who's going to talk to you about another profession that's very important in all this, and that's the legal profession. And Matthew's going to talk about contracts. Matthew's a partner in AMK Law, which operates in Adelaide and Melbourne. Good afternoon, Matthew. How are you?
Good, thank you, Peter, and it's a pleasure to be here, particularly after Amanda's fantastic presentation, to be able to explain some of the aspects, particularly on force majeure, which is something that I think a lot of people might have heard about, particularly in the midst of this coronavirus. And it's a real pleasure to bring into people's knowledge and awareness throughout this presentation, particularly in light of some of the experiences we've had for our clients, and some of the changes that have taken place in our clients' commercial and dispute resolution matters. What I'd like to cover today is exactly what is meant by force majeure, how the term operates for business contracts. Also, I'd like to be able to cover today a little bit about how organisations and companies can use the principle of force majeure to assist them with the impacts that are being faced as a result of this COVID-19. So, as we all know, because of the period of time in which we've been in lockdown and we've experienced changes in the way that we do things, even in this very moment, having this presentation being done through Zoom software, which is something I believe that we're all now experts in.
Thank you. We won't get too cocky.
It's really caused some changes due to the COVID-19 pandemic and the way that we need to work in our current circumstances. The business world itself is very different, and particularly for people and businesses that are involved in contracts, the notion of force majeure is particularly relevant. So what does force majeure mean? It's a pretty fancy sounding word, but what it actually means is, from the French, being a French word, it means a superior force. So one of the issues is, what exactly is within the scope of a superior force, and how is a global pandemic such as COVID-19 viewed in light of that meaning given superior force? That's one of the things I'm going to get into in a moment. But before we go into that, I think it's really interesting and useful to understand, first of all, what is a contract? Because remembering force majeure is used as one of the tools that might be able to assist in business contracts, given the current pandemic. So, what is a business contract? Essentially, a business contract it's an agreement that can either be in writing, can be verbal, or can be in part verbal and in part written. But it's key to have the following elements in order to have a legally binding contract. The first element is there needs to be an offer. So there has to be an offer that's made from one person to another, or one organisation to another, or between multiple persons. But there must be an offer. That offer itself needs to be accepted. So the best way of acceptance would be in writing. But these days, you have acceptance occurring in many forms. The key is there has to be an acceptance of that offer. Then the parties themselves, they need to intend to actually be in a legally binding contractual relationship. This term itself, in a legal sense, is known as the intention to create legal relations. You also, in order to have a contract, need to have consideration. So this essentially means having something that is payable or is going to be paid as a result of entering into the contract. And there's an old English line of cases that look at whether or not a peppercorn itself can be used as consideration. The answer is yes. So the point there being, the consideration given doesn't have to be something of great value. It can be something of quite insignificant value. The point is there has to be something given in exchange. When you've got those items met, you can then look at the scenario and say, yes, in the business sense, you've got a contract that's been formed. And one of the advantages, one of the benefits of that is knowing that there's actually a legally enforceable document in place, or legally enforceable contract, if verbal, that's in place. If we were to look at written contracts in particular, which is key and paramount when looking at the notion of force majeure, we would need to see whether or not the force majeure clause and term is actually specified as a provision in the contract. See, the reason why I'm saying specific to written contracts is it's very unusual for people to, in their discussions in an oral contract, to discuss and define the scope of a principle such as force majeure. It can happen, but very, very rare. So that said, when you've got a written contract, a force majeure clause operates so that one party's obligations or the party's obligations under the contract can actually cease to exist as a result of the events or the catastrophes. For example, there's a potential for a contract to have a clause that might say something along the lines of, the parties in this contract aren't liable for any loss, claim or damage where that has arisen directly as a result of the party's breach, where that breach is an immediate result of force majeure. Therefore, no breach actually has occurred. So in this particular COVID-19 situation, there's been a lot of talk. And if you have a look online, or even if you have a look at our AMK Law website, you can see that there's articles that have been written about force majeure and the contract provision. The reason for that is most lawyers see this force majeure principle as perhaps being the key for businesses to get out of contracts where the business has been affected as a result of COVID-19. There are limitations though, because nobody foresaw this global pandemic. Nobody thought we'd be sitting in front of our computers working from home and using social media as the means to try and maintain some human reality and humanity throughout this period. Nobody thought that we'd be spending Easter away from our families. So, with those points in mind, the principle of force majeure was never foreseen as being applicable to a global pandemic to the extent of COVID-19. That means that you need to then look at the specific contract and the specific scope and depth of the definition of force majeure insofar as used in that particular contract itself. Because in some contracts, the definition given to force majeure, the operation of the clause within that particular contract, may in fact cover COVID-19 as the global pandemic. And in fact, some contracts that we've looked at and advised upon for our clients have done just that. Now, what can you do if you're in a contract that you want to see if you're able to get out of through the operation of force majeure? Well, first of all, a great place to start is have a look at the definitions themselves. If there's a defined term of force majeure, see if that term extends to a global pandemic. Also, read through the contract itself and see whether there's a force majeure clause. If you're unsure, it's worth speaking with a lawyer to get specific advice on that point, because you don't want to be in the situation where you're complying with a contract despite the difficulties that you might be exposed to, or even penalised under a contract, where in fact you could take the benefit of force majeure. The other thing you can do is, in this particular time, right now, doors are just starting to open up a little more. The social distancing laws are becoming that slightly more relaxed, but we don't know what's going to happen as a result. Are we going to go back into lockdown? Are we all going to survive and thrive? What's going to happen over the next few months? Nobody knows precisely for sure. With that in mind, it's very important to remember the force majeure clause, the key in the definition to allow in the force majeure meaning as defined in your particular contract to extend to global pandemics. Because if you're entering into a new contract and you have the opportunity to negotiate and include force majeure provisions to assist you, that might be very worthwhile, particularly because we don't know what's going to happen next as we come out of this particular pandemic. The consequences of force majeure and coronavirus in our business, it's obviously a new period, and hopefully we are moving through this and into a much better time. But I hope that you're able to take these two key points away. Number one, for existing contracts. Number two, for new contracts. And for those existing contracts, check if the force majeure clause has been written in a way to assist you. New contracts to be negotiated and written with force majeure clauses that you can rely on, depending on what happens as a result as we move through the stages of this pandemic and lockdown period. Overall, thank you very much for listening to my presentation today. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions, and I wish you all the absolute best.
Thank you very much, Matthew. I'm just checking to see if we've got any questions. We don't, but people may think of questions later on, especially the ones that are going to watch this as a recording in their own time. And for those people, if you have questions that you'd like Matthew to answer, and also Amanda, can you please send emails through to us, peter@essbiztools.com.au, and I'll make sure Matthew and Amanda get those and they're able to give you your answers. It's a very interesting question, isn't it? Is there much legal dispute arisen already, Matthew, in the courts as to debates over force majeure clauses in contracts?
I think overall the courts have been impacted by COVID-19. There's actually been a lot of changes in the court processes themselves. There's been many trial dates that have been pushed back significantly.
Yeah.
There's been real delays in other matters. Even there's been a greater need for matters to settle and resolve earlier in the process. So, for example, we've had cases recently where our clients were prepared and wanted to go to trial, but were much more willing to settle because of the amount of time that it would likely take in these present circumstances before getting an actual trial date, whereas it would probably be much more efficient in normal times. Within the scope of court, the force majeure provision itself, there hasn't been a floodgate of cases in that regard, but who knows what's going to happen next. Sometimes these kind of things can take a little bit of time to actually play out properly. But I can say this, Peter, there's definitely been some serious negotiations between solicitors setting out the parameters insofar as force majeure is concerned. And in the heat of those types of communications, past cases have been drawn upon. The future precedents are yet to be set.
Right. Amanda, can I bring you in with the accountants that you're coaching and dealing with, or have any of them talked to you about force majeure clauses?
No, they haven't. No.
Okay.
They may be talking about it with their clients, but it's certainly nothing that that they've actually brought up in the discussions that I've had with them, which is more around the practice management type things within their own practices. But I haven't heard of anyone at this stage, but I'm sure there is.
Yes. Okay. We had one comment, Matthew. Amazing, Matthew. Very useful info we needed. Thanks. Obviously, that person was very grateful for your comments. So that's good.
I'm grateful for that. Of course, Peter, we're grateful for that kind feedback as well, aren't we?
Yes, that's right. And so once again, to those of you, irrespective of when you're watching this video, these are information sessions to help you on a whole range of matters to do with COVID-19 coronavirus. And we're trying to touch on a few of them. And that's why Matthew's with us today to bring a legal perspective. And obviously, Amanda was basically directing her comments today to alert the business community, small businesses and medium-sized enterprises, that accountants can do a lot more work for you than your tax returns. Tax returns are important, of course, but accountants are trained at university and then in their professional training to become chartered accountants or CPAs to undertake a wide range of work. And we're illustrating to you that accountants can do this work for you, but just make sure that they have the appropriate qualifications and ask them about that and have a conversation with them.
And the other thing there, Peter, they can do so much more. And a lot of small businesses think, oh, we're only a small business, we don't need these things. And it might have been some of those things on that little graph that I had, the tax planning, the FBT. It could even be in some of the legal issues that Matthew just spoke about. Yeah. No matter how small a business you're a business, and the tax law is the tax law. All these different things with contracts apply equally to small and large businesses. So it's really about ensuring that everywhere, whether it's HR, legal, accounting, you actually have got the right people on your side and the people that actually are professional and can actually lead you where you need to be.
That's right, because I've mentioned before, I was involved in a listed public company as the company secretary, CFO for a number of years. And what I discovered is that big businesses are basically a whole series of small businesses put together. And but the big benefit they've got is this network of advisors. They're either employed in-house in the big company, or they're on external retainers. They're people like Matthew who are brought in to answer legal questions. And really, in this new world that we're now going into, post-coronavirus, I think businesses are going to have to be far more conscious of this. Who are their key advisors? There'll be very few small businesses can employ those people. They've probably got a production manager and a sales manager, but they might not have a marketing manager. They're using an external service provider for that. They might not have a software consultant in-house, but the same thing applies to accountants and law. But people need access to all these people if they're going to run successful businesses. And I think it's going to be very much obvious that they need those services as we go on post 30th of September this year. Unfortunately, I think there's going to be a lot of problems at the 30th of September. And Matthew, you might quickly like to comment, if you can, on what's happening with the government's deferment of action type amendments that have been made to the Corporations Act and a few other things, the 6 months delay, so that we've got no legal action really happening at present, have we, from instigated by banks and lenders, but people expect it to happen in October.
That's right, Peter. So the amendments have been made, including with respect to creditors' statutory demands that used to be quite an efficient mechanism in which to enforce a debt that was payable. The amendments in that respect have meant that the period of time has been significantly extended before any legal process actually needs to be responded to in that way, and the amount has been significantly increased as well. So the benefits that were once derived from a creditor's statutory demand under the Corporations Act are no longer there because of those time periods. One way that we've experienced dealing with that issue is by pursuing normal legal proceedings in the magistrate court because of the time periods that apply before a notice of defence needs to be filed following a statement of claim. It means that right now it's a much more efficient approach in that debt recovery process.
Okay. I mean, all these temporary arrangements cease around the end of September, don't they? So it's could be a fair bit of action occurring in October, November.
And we don't know whether or not the period will be extended. I think
That's
the
right.
government has quite a free rein in terms of its approach in that respect. So it'll be interesting to see what happens and if in fact the loosening does occur then.
That's right. Okay. We'll all be waiting to see what happens there. I now want to move on, and I'm just going to switch the screens again if I can, and give you an update on COVID-19 SME news of some of the issues that are confronting all businesses. Just a reminder that the JobKeeper registration closes on 31 May. As far as I understand, that relates to businesses that wish to claim JobKeeper for the months of April. You need to make sure you have registered with the tax office by the 31 May. You can, if you believe that your income has dropped by more than 30% in a subsequent month or 3-month period, lodge your application then, but the $1,500 per fortnight per employee will only apply from the date that you've suffered the 30% drop in income. The JobKeeper monthly lodgement date has been extended. Originally, the legislation or the tax office was saying you had to lodge your declarations from now on by the 7th day of the next month. It's now been extended to the 14th day of the month. I'm sure accountants have welcomed that, because you are required to declare your actual income for the month just ended. So obviously that's going to be for the month of May, has to be lodged by the 14th of June, but you also have to supply an estimate as to what your income is going to be for the month of June. And that's also got to be supplied to the ATO by the 14th of June. So please keep those dates in mind, and don't run into your accountant on the last day of that 14-day period. Please try to get it in a little bit earlier so that this work all gets done in an orderly process. I've already mentioned that about the drop in turnover of more than 30% occurring later in the period. Just a reminder, because in one of our other webinars the other day, there was some comments being asked about sole traders, partners, directors, and adult beneficiaries. Those categories of people can be eligible for JobKeeper. The requisite, of course, is that the entity must have dropped their income by 30%. And that's on the comparable months from 2019 with 20, or the 3-month period, or the alternative tests. There are 7 of them that the tax commissioner has announced, where that comparison is not fair or logistically able to be undertaken. And bear in mind that you can only claim JobKeeper once as either one of those categories that are on the screen or as an employee, irrespective of who you are with. And for each business, if you're have a board of directors and there's 4 on the board, well, only 1 director per company can gain the benefit, and the same applies for partners and adult beneficiaries in trusts. So please talk to your accountants about that if you need any clarification, or you could contact Amanda. Another reminder, because I've had a couple of people querying me about this, the Commercial Tenancy Code of Conduct, which is based on state or territory government legislation. It is not federal, because this is not an area for the federal government. The state and territory governments have either already introduced the legislation or are undertaking to introduce it, but you must qualify for the JobKeeper program if you wish to utilise that code of conduct to negotiate for a rent waiver and or rent deferral from your landlord. Even though you might not intend to apply for the $1,500 per fortnight wage payment under JobKeeper, you have to qualify, which is obviously saying that your turnover must be under $50 million per annum, but you also must have suffered that 30% reduction in income. The other item I just wanted to mention is the SME guarantee loans. Coronavirus SME guarantee loans. A business person approached me yesterday and made the comment that you had to be eligible for JobKeeper to get those loans. That's not my understanding. In fact, the coronavirus SME guarantee loans are available for businesses with turnovers under $50 million. But I can't see anywhere that you have to be eligible for JobKeeper. So you can apply for those loans of up to $250,000, repayable over a 3-year period at a low interest rate. The Commonwealth government's supplying the security for 50% of the debt. I understand some of the banks are charging around 4.5% for those loans, and at least one of them's asking for personal guarantees, even though the guidelines from the Reserve Bank said no guarantees, but they're after personal guarantees, and I can probably understand that. The other big issue I think you need to be thinking of, and Amanda was referring to it, is your strategies beyond 30th of September. You really should be thinking about those now. And I would urge you to start talking to your accountants, because if you decided you wanted to make a loan application, you're going to need a business plan, budgets, cash flow forecasts, interim accounts to at least the end of March this year, maybe April now, and your financial accounts for 18-19, go back a year, 18-19, all finalised, so that that information can be submitted to the bank. So there's a bit of organisation to do there, Accountants are very busy. There's a lot of tax returns still to be lodged in respect of 1819, and they've got this issue as well. Plus, we're about to start a whole new financial year. I'd also remind you that a government agency has published the COVID-19 safety plans, and there's a fair amount of information contained in there which is workplace health and safety orientated. Every business should be downloading the COVID-19 safety plans and making sure that you have implemented in your business. Otherwise, they could have some legal issues down track, I imagine, Matthew, if something goes wrong. And
good point, Peter.
yeah, so people should not ignore those COVID-19 safety plans. I sat down the other night and read them in detail. There's a lot in there, and some businesses could get caught out on that, and the someone that's taking action against you, I suspect, is going to be able to say that every business has been notified. It's on the government websites. Is that right, Matthew?
That's my understanding as well.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So ESS Small Business, thank you for being with us today. If you have questions, please send them through to us. We're here to assist you. We have a COVID-19 survival plan available on our website. Someone did ring me during the week and said, our accountant's only interested in doing tax. Well, we are able to introduce SMEs to accountants who are members of our network around Australia, who are prepared to offer Chief Financial Officer services. If you need someone to help you prepare a business plan, your budgets, your cash flow forecasts, etc., send me an email and we will send you some names of people that you are then most welcome to have a conversation with. And you can visit our website to get all this information, www.esssmallbusiness.com.au. The next survival panel in this series is next Wednesday, the 3rd of June at 12 noon AEST. And we have resolved to continue this program through until the 30th of September. So you can mark in your diaries or your calendars, if you're a small, medium-sized business operator, every Wednesday at 12 noon AEST. We're changing the style a bit next week because I'm very conscious that there's going to be, I suspect, a lot of problems post 30 September with businesses being able to deal with banks. Banks have outlaid a lot of money in loan funds already. They are providing for very high doubtful debts according to their interim financial accounts. And I suspect it's going to be difficult for a lot of businesses, small and medium businesses, to raise capital. And therefore, we are wanting to introduce into these webinars some other speakers who are going to talk about other ways of raising money for your businesses. And one of the most important ways, I believe, is crowdsourced funding equity raising, which started in Australia about 2 years ago. Australia's behind the rest of the Western world, who have got a start on us of 6 to 7 years. So crowdsourced funding equity raising is going very well in other places around the world. Australia's now got it. It's been disrupted over the last 8 weeks, of course. So next Wednesday, we have Andrew Ward, who's one of the founders of the concept of crowdsourced funding equity raising in Australia. He's been involved for nearly 8 years in various committees that were lobbying the government to get crowdsourced funding equity raising introduced into Australia. For that 8-year period, Andrew's been an independent director. So he's not an intermediary, he's an independent director on Crowdfunding Institute of Australia. Andrew is going to present a summary of where crowdsourced funding came from, where it is at present, and what he thinks it's going to do in the future. And in particular, how it can assist businesses as we go through this period post the end of JobKeeper, post the end of the cash flow supplement that the tax office is paying, post the end of the apprentice subsidy, and The coronavirus SME loans also finish at the 30th of September. What's going to happen in that new period in October, November this year and through into 2021? Andrew Ward is going to talk about that. The other speaker next week is Jeff Goodrich. Jeff is a business consultant, business operator from Darwin. He's the founder and ambassador of Territory Proud, which is a Northern Territory organisation with 380 members. Most of them are businesses. About 20 of them are accountancy firms. The rest are businesses. But the Northern Territory has been the leading area in getting back to business operations. And Jeff's going to share that with us, the experience that they've had through being able to have people go into restaurants and hotels and have a meal and have a drink and start relaxing again. So he's going to, and he's also going to bring you some comments on strategies you might implement to save money in these difficult times. So to register for that webinar, please go to our website, esssmallbusiness.com.au/webinars. And if you want more information, you can go to our website on ESS Small Business. We are sending the people who have registered for this webinar a link to the recording, and we are also sending the links to the recording to thousands of other people who are on our database. So if you miss out on getting a link to the recording, please contact us and we will send that to you. So stay safe, but start thinking now, please, if you're a business operator, about what your business is going to do post 30 September 2020. You need to be thinking about this now and getting your business in a very proactive mode. Thank you very much for your contribution today, Amanda.
Thank you. You're very welcome, Peter.
And thank you, Matthew, for talking to us. You still in Adelaide?
Yes, Peter.
Okay.
The gates are closed, so it's worth waiting until everything sort of reopens again, so I can easily move between the two offices. So
that's right. Okay. So thank you very much for your contribution. Thank you, everyone who either watched this webinar live, who are watching it on Facebook. So we've been recording this whole time on Facebook. So I should have given a message to the people viewing us on Facebook a little bit earlier. Obviously, you could not send us through a question during the live webinar. If you think of any questions now, please send an email to peter@essbiztools.com.au. I'll pass the questions on to Amanda and Matthew, or if they're questions to me, I'll answer them. And Amanda and Matthew will answer the questions and we'll send them back to you. But we'll also post your question and the answers onto our website on ESS Small Business so that everyone can have a look. So thank you, and we'll see you again next Wednesday for the next webinar in this series. Thank you very much and have a good afternoon.
thank you.
Goodbye to everyone. We'll see you later. Thank you.